Freya is the goddess Norse myth never quite manages to simplify. Call her up, and most modern retellings hand you the same two words, love and beauty. That's true as far as it goes, but the oldest poems that mention her show someone harder to file away. A woman whose fury shakes the halls of Asgard hard enough to break jewelry off her own neck. A war leader who claims first pick of the battle dead before Odin gets the rest. The one who taught the king of the gods the magic he later becomes famous for. Beauty was never the whole story, and the sources never treated it as one. She is Freyja to the people who first told these tales, Old Norse for lady, and in a mythology thin on surviving detail about its goddesses, she is one of the best documented figures in it. Freya belongs to the Vanir, an older family of Norse gods, tied to fertility, wealth and magic, distinct from the war and sky-focused Aesir, who include Odin and Thor. After a war between the two divine families ended in stalemate, Freya came to live among the Aesir in Asgard as a hostage of the peace, alongside her father, Yrthr, and her twin brother, Freyr, Ynglinga Saga, Chich. 4. She never stopped being Vanir in spirit. She brought Vanir magic with her, and the Norse sources rank her among the most powerful figures in either family. In Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, she is named second only to Frigg, Odin's wife, among the goddesses of Asgard. She keeps her own hall, Aesir-Vanir, in a realm called Fólkvangr, Field of the Host, and travels by chariot, pulled by two cats. Freya's stories don't stay in one lane. They move from a war between two families of gods, to a stolen hammer, to a magic only she could teach, each one complicating the goddess of love and beauty, label a little further. Freya's origin is bound up with a war. The Aesir-Vanir war ends without a clear winner, and the two families seal the peace by trading hostages. Freya, Freyr and Njörður go to live among the Aesir, while Hunir and Mimir go to the Vanir Ynglinga Saga, Kh. 4, Vafarúth Nismale, Sech 39. Most scholars don't read this as a record of an actual battle. It reads more like mythologic, a story explaining how two distinct religious traditions, the sky and war, Aesir, and the fertility and wealth Vanir, ended up worshipped side by side in the same pantheon. Her family ties come with an uncomfortable detail. The poetic Edda preserves it as an insult. In Lokasenna, the trickster god Loki taunts Njörður for having fathered Freya on his own sister. It's ugly, and it's in the source text. Norse scholarship treats it as exactly what it looks like, Loki scoring a cheap shot in an insult match. Ask where Brisingamen came from and you'll get two different answers, depending on which book you're holding. The older tested version, preserved in the Prose Edda Skaldskapa Mal, has Loki and the watchman god, Heimdallr, fighting over the necklace in seal form, Loki stealing it, Heimdallr recovering it. No dwarves, no bargain. The version most people know today comes from Sturla Atra, a much later short story preserved in the Flateyjarbók, compiled in the late 1300s by two Christian priests. There, four dwarf brothers forge the necklace and offer it to Freya for a price, one night with each of them. She agrees and gets her necklace. It's a vivid story and worth telling, but it belongs to a text written some 3 centuries after Christianity had already reshaped how these old gods were remembered, folding them into a moralized, quasi-historical frame. The earlier telling and the later one aren't really the same story, wearing different details. They're separated by hundreds of years and a different worldview. Freya's best-known myth barely centers her, and that's part of what makes her role in it so striking. In Trimskvitha, the giant trimmer steals Thor's hammer and will only return it in exchange for Freya's hand in marriage. The gods ask her to go. She refuses so completely that the poem describes the halls of the Aesir shaking and her necklace falling from her neck in fury. So Heimdallr proposes a workaround, dress Thor as the bride instead. Thor, veiled and resentful, eats an ox and ate salmon at the wedding feast, and reclaims his hammer once it's laid in the disguised bride's lap to bless the marriage. The comedy in the poem targets Thor's indignity. Freya barely appears past her refusal, and what she does get is treated with real narrative weight. Her fury is the reason the whole absurd plan is necessary in the first place. Grimnismal names Fólkvangr as one of the great halls of the Norse afterlife, and states plainly that Freya rules it, choosing half of every day's battle dead for her own hall before Odin claims the rest for Valhalla. It's a detail modern retellings tend to skip in favor of her softer titles, but it's right there in the primary source. Freya is a death goddess as much as a love goddess, presiding over slain warriors on equal footing with Odin himself. Here is where Freya's story gets genuinely uncertain, and that uncertainty is worth sitting with. Snorri's prose, Edda, ranks Freya next to Frigg, meaning just below her, among the goddesses of Asgard. The two also share a specific, oddly matched detail. Both are credited, in separate sources, with owning a set of falcon feathers usable for shapeshifting. Norse scholars have long noticed that Frigg and Freya overlap in more ways than their names suggest. The scholar Stefan Grundy, surveying the question in The Concept of the Goddess, put it cautiously: whether Frigg and Freya were originally a single goddess is a difficult one, made more so by the scantiness of pre-Viking Age references to Germanic goddesses, and the most honest thing a modern account can do is lay out the arguments rather than declare a winner. Some of those arguments reach back further still, to a goddess named Nerthus, described by the Roman historian Tacitus around 98 CE as a Mother Earth figure worshipped by a confederation of Germanic tribes, her image carried in procession on a sacred wagon, Germania, Kh. 48. Linguistically, Nerthus is the earlier form of the name that becomes Eother, Freya's own father. Scholars including Britt-Marie Nestrom have pointed to this, along with watery, fertility-coded place names tied to Frigg's own halls, as evidence that Nerthus, Njörður, Frigg, and Freya may all trace back to one older fertility deity that split, over centuries, into the more specialized gods the Eddas describe. Not every scholar agrees. Gro Steinsland has pushed back on the great goddess, reading specifically for Freya, arguing she isn't tied to earth and motherhood the way a true Nerthus-style figure would be. The debate stays open. A second, separate mystery orbits the same territory. Völuspá describes a being named Guðveig, gold drunk or gold greed, who practices Sitha and is speared and burned 3 times by the Aesir, yet keeps surviving, an event some read as the spark that starts the Aesir-Vanir war outright. A number of scholars, including Rudolf Simek, have proposed that Guðveig is Freya herself under another name. Others read her as a personification of gold or greed, rather than a version of Freya at all. Like the Frigg question, this one has no settled answer, only a live scholarly conversation. Compared to some goddesses, surprisingly little survives about organized worship dedicated specifically to Freya. The clearest ancient ritual evidence from her wider family belongs to Nerthus's wagon procession, and later, a similar wagon cult tied to her brother Freya, recorded by the medieval chronicler Adam of Bremen at the temple in Uppsala. One correction, since it circulates widely online, modern heathen and Asatru communities keep a harvest holiday called Freyfaxi. It has no ancient attestation as a Freya festival, or as anyone's festival. Freyfaxi is a horse in Hrafnikal's saga, belonging to Freya, her twin brother. The modern holiday was coined in 1974 by the American Asatru Free Assembly, modeled on the Wiccan calendar. It's a real, sincerely observed modern practice. It just isn't ancient, and it was never Freya's to begin with. These days, Freya lives on mostly through story. She's a recurring figure in fiction, comics, and games. Even her name lingers in an unsettled place. English speakers still can't fully agree whether Friday was originally Frigg's day or hers, the same tangled identity question raised above, playing out in a word people use every week without a second thought. She goes by many names. Freyja, Lady, the plain meaning of her name, Vanadis, Lady of the Vanir, Vanabrutha, Bride of the Vanir, and Mistress of Fólkvangr. Her gifts run deep. Seidr, the Norse magic of prophecy and fate, which Ynglinga saga says she taught to the Aesir themselves, a cloak of falcon feathers that carries its wearer between worlds. First choice of half the battle dead each day, with Odin taking the other half for Valhalla. And tears that fall as gold, so that Norse poets named gold itself Freyja's weeping. Her symbols are Brísingamen, the necklace with two rival origin stories, the falcon feather cloak, the cat-drawn chariot, the boar Hildisvini, her protégé Uttar in disguise, and amber, tied in later folklore to her tears. At heart, she is direct and quick to fury. Offered as a bride to ransom Thor's hammer, she refuses outright, and the halls of Asgard shake. She is openly wanting, plain about her desires in a body of myth written down by scribes who were uneasy with female desire. And she is a teacher as much as a fighter, the one who brought Seether to the gods. Freya's myths never settle for one version of her. She refuses a marriage that would save a god's hammer, and her grief drips gold. She teaches magic to the king of the gods, and might, under another name entirely, be the spark that starts a war between two families of gods. 2 different centuries wrote 2 different stories about how she got her own necklace, and neither one erased the other. 1100 years after the last of these poems was written down, scholars are still arguing about who she really is, and whether she was ever fully separate from Frigg to begin with. Most goddesses don't draw that kind of scrutiny this far out. Freya does, and the argument shows no sign of ending. Freya never let anyone talk her out of her own fury or her own desire. She still doesn't. Let her teach you the same.